This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is the one that everybody wants, me.
Becky Lynch is going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're going to acknowledge me.
What's going on, everybody? Guys and girls, welcome back to another edition of the SmackDown Review right here on the WWE Podcast. As always, I am one of the hosts of this show, Michael Ritter. You can find me on Twitter at Michael5Ritter, and also one of the hosts of the Football Function Podcast, available on all of your podcasting platforms, including the one that you're listening to this show on. Now, typically, this is whenever I would introduce my usual co-host for this podcast, John Carrasco, but he is out sick right now, guys. So, if you would, why don't you go ahead and send some kind words to John, whether that is on Patreon, whether that is on Twitter. You can find him on Twitter at BigSpeaker, BIGG_speaker. And just go ahead and send him some well wishes. You know, John feeling under the weather right now. Typically, he is a workhorse here for the SmackDown Review. And I know he enjoys doing this. So, definitely was pretty under the weather for him to not make it, especially a SmackDown of this magnitude as we get to the road to WrestleMania. So get well soon, John, obviously. And we're definitely missing you here on the SmackDown Review. But the show must go on, and I'm going to do my best to provide you guys a pretty informative and decent SmackDown review here on the WWE Podcast, because obviously we take a lot of pride in making these episodes legit for whatever show here on the network you're listening to. But speaking of multiple shows here on the network, I'm actually doing double duty this week because I'm making an appearance, I should say, on Good Morning WWE with Mr. and Mrs. Casual Wrestling Fan. Been listening to that show. I listened to the Kanye Twitty episode actually just the other day at work, and I feel like that episode itself kind of gave me an idea as to what I could expect from a guest perspective, and I really like their format, their intro, absolute fire. I love that show so far from what I've heard of it, and we'll get more into that whenever I join them this weekend. So definitely tune in to Good Morning WWE if you haven't already caught their most recent episode, and definitely tune in to the upcoming episode where I'll be joining them, and we'll be talking about everything going on in WWE, and that's definitely something I'm looking forward to doing. But another thing I'm looking forward to doing is talking about this episode of SmackDown that aired on March the 3rd, 2023 from Washington, D.C. I saw a couple Commanders jerseys in the crowd. Now, some people might not have even noticed that. They might not pay any attention to that. But as a kid, I will say, just being an NFL fan, as you guys know, which I just plugged my football podcast a little bit earlier in the show, so clearly I'm a football fan. I always notice the football players' jerseys in the crowd, depending on what city they go to or if they're just a popular player. Like I always, as a kid, saw Michael Vick jerseys. That was my favorite player. So for whatever reason, my eyes would just be able to spot those in the crowd more often than another NFL player. But, I just remember, anytime they'd go to Philly, I'd see a Donovan McNabb jersey. Or anytime they'd go to a New York City show, we'd see a Tiki Barber jersey or a Michael Strahan jersey. Just obviously talking about the mid-2000s when I was a kid. But that's just what I would look for. And I noticed tonight that I saw some Commanders jerseys, and I think that might be the first time that I've seen a Commanders jersey. So definitely wanted to point that out here on the show. But, there really wasn't a whole lot of time as the show got underway for you to think about anything else. Roman Reigns' music hits. And what do you do if Roman Reigns' music hits? You pay attention to the TV and pretty much get consumed with what's going on in the show. And if you're in attendance, you stand up. That's just typically how it goes. You stand up for the entire entrance. You feel like a weirdo if you're not standing up. That's just kind of, how it is. I've been to a couple shows that Roman Reigns has come out in this version of himself. One of them just here recently at the Royal Rumble. And we were standing up for a while. I mean, those long intros that you see on TV, they are very, very long in person as well. And when you have somebody sitting right next to you on both sides who, whenever his music hits, they both stand up, of course, you're going to stand up as well. And that's just kind of how it is at a live show. But here, watching on TV, that intro is very, very long, no doubt. It's probably like 4 or 5 times as long as the promo that Roman Reigns actually cut tonight, which he didn't really get a chance to before, I should say. I want to clear that up because he did get some mic time. But the promo that he initially tried to cut whenever he first got the microphone in his hand, all he said was, "Washington, D.C., acknowledge me." And then bam, immediately interrupted by Cody Rhodes. And this is pretty much whenever the show gets underway, because Cody Rhodes just goes out there and he says that he's not there to invade, but only to have a conversation with his WrestleMania opponent. So he doesn't really see the need for the rest of the bloodline to be out there with Roman, because obviously Paul Heyman, Jimmy Uso, Solo Sikoa, and I will say, my roommate can vouch for this, as Roman Reigns was coming out before Samantha Irvin, I apologize, was doing the intro for the bloodline, I almost said it word for word what she said. I just introduced Jimmy Uso before Solo Sikoa, and Samantha Irvin, she did Paul Heyman, Solo, then Jimmy, and then Roman. I said the exact same thing, though, pretty much, and I thought that was pretty impressive. I will say, just toot my own horn in that situation. I thought it was pretty funny. Samantha Irvin, though, elite on the mic, I will say, and I know John, if he was here, he'd be agreeing with me, and he's probably agreeing with me right now because I know that he is on board with the Samantha Irvin train. But Roman Reigns does agree with Cody whenever he insists that there's no reason for them to be out there with him. He tells Paul Heyman, "Wise man, leave us." Tells Solo to leave as well, so they do just that, and they leave. Then Roman Reigns drops the championship belts right between he and Cody, right in front of Cody, actually. And, pulls a page out of Cody's playbook by saying, "What do you want to talk about?" Which Cody thought that was a little bit funny as well. Cody goes on to explain why Roman Reigns may seem unbeatable to others, why he may seem like an immovable mountain to other superstars. But for Cody Rhodes, that's kind of sort of his thing. That's what he alludes to. That's kind of sort of right up his alley and what he's done in the past. He goes on to reference multiple examples where he has overcome the odds. And, a couple of those being, he says, nobody expected him to evolve from Randy Orton's understudy. Nobody expected him to be anything more than just the third or second most popular wrestler in that legacy faction that was obviously led by Randy Orton. He says nobody expected him to survive the Stardust character. Nobody expected him to be able to, go with his indie buddies and have success, alluding to AEW and, his ventures there where he was off doing his own thing. So it basically says, people have doubted me before, so your smirk, you not taking me serious as a challenger for you or as a worthy opponent, that's nothing new to me. I've experienced all of this before. And he just basically says that he's pretty comfortable in this spot. And Roman basically just backhandedly compliments him in his promo. He basically says, did you rehearse that all week? That was really good, basically just laughing in his face. And he goes on to ask a couple rhetorical questions about championships specifically and Cody's history in that department, or lack thereof. He asks him if he's ever main evented WrestleMania, another rhetorical question. And you could just see the look on Cody's face. The camera kept looking at him every time Roman Reigns would ask one of these questions. And you could just tell that they were a little bit personal shots that he knew were true. It's one of those things. Like me personally, I'm in a Madden league. And just here recently, I'm the Falcons, obviously. I made it to the NFC Championship game in this league. But for about 4 seasons, and, I'm not proud of this by any means, I didn't make the playoffs. Now, I will say, this is an all Madden competitive league where there's other users. I'm not just losing to computer teams left and right, which, I kind of am losing to a lot of computer teams, but that's neither here nor there. But either way, the whole point in me explaining this is to say that, if someone were to tell me, hey, you missed the playoffs for 4 years in a row, that would be one of those rough burns, ones that hit a little bit deep because there's really nothing you can say. It's facts. There's nothing Cody could say in that situation where Roman was calling him out and saying, dude, you haven't really done anything yet. Basically saying, do you know who you're talking to? He didn't say that, but he was just, referencing it. And he goes on to kind of talk a little bit about himself whenever he asked Cody if he's ever main evented WrestleMania, because that's Roman Reigns' specialty. Cody talks about his specialty being, overcoming the odds. Roman Reigns' specialty is main eventing WrestleMania, and he has the most experience in that department. So clearly, he has certain things here that are in his advantage. I would argue that he is the heavy favorite here if it wasn't for, the booking aspect of all this, just in terms of pure credibility right now. Roman Reigns is still damn near untouchable until somebody proves otherwise, and Cody Rhodes just might be that guy. But nonetheless, Roman Reigns brings up how he's been groomed for this specific thing since he was a little boy by his father and also by Cody Rhodes' father. Then he mentions how close they were and, all the personal history between the two of them. And he even gives us a little bit of a Dusty Rhodes impression whenever he tells a story about Dusty telling Roman Reigns, you got it. You could never sell it. You could never get rid of it no matter what because you have it. And clearly we're seeing that Dusty Rhodes has that eye for talent. And he was right all along because Roman Reigns clearly does have it. But then he continues to show respect until he stops, Roman Reigns that is, and he starts mentioning how Dusty never ever mentioned Cody during all of their discussions and all the conversations that they had. And he also says that he wishes he was still here. But the line gets crossed, or more than crossed, whenever Roman Reigns says that if there's anything Dusty didn't teach you, Cody, I'll do it for him. And that was... You could see it on Cody's face. That was just tough. A lot of the stuff Roman was saying probably did hit a little bit close to home for Cody. Probably made him feel a little bit better than, I don't know, hearing it just from some other random wrestler because it's true. It's no secret that during those NXT days, whenever the first crop of NXT talent were coming up, Dusty Rhodes had his hands on them. He had his fingerprints all over that product. And Roman Reigns is definitely in that category. But Cody essentially responds by looking at Roman Reigns and saying, if I can't beat you at WrestleMania, then you really are the son that my father always wanted. The two shake hands, obviously, and then Cody says, may the best man win, and I cannot agree more. May the best man win here. It's extremely tough to pick who I want to win this match, just being completely honest, because it's no secret I was a big-time Roman Reigns fan before the Tribal Chief era. I was the big dog Roman Reigns fan, the babyface Roman Reigns fan, when he was getting booed out of the building. And now seeing it come full circle where there's so many bandwagon fans, I'll say it, bandwagon fans, that hopped on this train after, he was damn near unbeatable. It did make it a little bit, I guess, bittersweet. It kind of made it a little bit watered down. And I'm not saying, I don't want people to jump on and be a Roman Reigns fan, but specifically the ones that were booing him through the, out of arenas on a weekly basis. As a Roman Reigns fan, it made me sour on, the in-crowd WWE fans, or the WWE universe, I should say, is how they were referred to at the time. I mean, it was extremely annoying. Just being honest, I remember so many episodes of Raw where he would come out, you'd hear his music, the durner. As soon as you hear that immediate boo, just it's almost as if it was pumped in crowd noise or just a part of his song altogether. But I don't know, it's tough for me to pick who I want to win this match because I'm also really starting to become a pretty big Cody Rhodes fan. Just being honest, I didn't see it coming. I wasn't a huge Cody Rhodes fan when he was in Legacy. I always thought he was a little bit, I guess, forced because he was so small during that time, just how small he was and the guys he was going up against. I was like, man, it's so unrealistic, that Cody Rhodes would have a legit shot to beat some of these guys. But time goes on, and then obviously when I come back to watch wrestling around 2014, 2015, he's the Stardust character. So I'm like, man, I'm not really buying into this character. I don't really care for it one way or the other. I kind of wish it would go away. And then sure enough, it does go away. And he goes on to do all this stuff and reinvent himself in another company. And then he comes back at where else but WrestleMania 38 in Arlington, Texas, AT&T Stadium, where I was there in attendance and experiencing that moment, something that I'll never forget, obviously. Fast forward the clock about, 8 or 9 months later, so to speak, something along those lines. Maybe around 10 months, I don't know, honestly. My math is really not on point after these SmackDown shows and during the review shows because typically it's late at night. My brain's going 100 miles an hour a different direction, and I took a lot of notes, so to speak. Just, it's in the notes app typically. I used to use my laptop for this way back in the day when I first started doing the SmackDown reviews. Now I use the Notes app in the phone or a Spiral, and it definitely is the way to go without a doubt. But fast forward, however many months later, we see Cody Rhodes win the Royal Rumble in person. So, I mean, it's going to be weird not being at WrestleMania in LA whenever he likely wins the championship, because I feel like I was there for the first big moment, the second big moment, although you could argue that maybe the Hell in a Cell match with Seth could be viewed as his second big moment. But the Royal Rumble win, him being at WrestleMania, I feel like those are just, on a different tier. And I know one of them got Match of the Year, but still, the Hell in a Cell match that just tells you how big the actual moment is. It being a hell of a match, that's a whole nother conversation. Clearly, that's why the Hell in a Cell was awarded that. I'm not saying that the matches that he was in at WrestleMania and then, him doing his thing, entering the Royal Rumble at number 30 and then being the odds-on favorite, winning it. I'm not saying that those matches in of themselves were better than the Hell in a Cell, but the moments were more meaningful. I get it. He had a purple arm and a torn pec or bicep, whatever it was, in the Hell in a Cell match. So clearly, Cody Rhodes he's on fire right now. Even the moments where he's completely injured and probably has one of the worst nights of his career and the most painful, he ends up getting match of the night. So I guess that just tells you all you need to know about Cody Rhodes and where he is right now. But yeah, man, his song, everything about his character right now, I'm with it. I do believe that he is the right guy, just where we are right now. You got to just go with the wind sometimes, You got to just kind of blow with the wind and just let the things unfold how they are. Because I'm going to be honest, for the longest time, people have been asking that question. Who's going to be the next guy to beat Roman Reigns? Who's the next champion? And it's hard to forecast it. It's hard to book it. It's hard to find the guy whenever you're the one picking him. When you're the one looking at the crop of talent and, you have to make that decision. So whenever you see one, right before, whether it's manufactured or not, whether it's shoved down our throats or not, the story is there for Cody Rhodes that he talks about finishing. And I think that, it kind of makes it easy to say, all right, I could see it. I could see him beating Roman. It feels like the time is right. And I've said multiple times, even to my roommate, if not Cody, who? And if not now, when? So I guess we'll kind of see how this thing unfolds, but I'm definitely excited to say the least. Moving on to the next segment that happened here, we get Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan. This match right here, Liv didn't really do anything that made me feel like she was going to win this match at any point, but there were a couple spots in the match that caught my eye. Number one, the suicide dive that she did right before a commercial break. It was kind of early in the match, but man, it was pretty scary. I feel like there's some superstars that reminds you why it's called the suicide dive. Like whether it's they don't execute it properly or just time and time again they have close calls to where you just every time you see them attempt it, you hold your breath. People like to allude, to the Lita moment back on Monday Night Raw, her and Trish Stratus for the Women's Championship, where she had that moment where she nearly broke her neck, scorpion folded in half, and she goes on to win the match. It's a very iconic moment. We look back on it now and we stand up and we give it a round of applause. But I remember watching that night, and I can think back of it now just as an adult and know how close that situation was to being one of the most never talked about nights again in WWE because of the possibilities and how horrific another outcome could have been. And that's just a realistic part of this sport. That's just a realistic aspect and possibility what could have happened. I'm thinking God and whoever was watching over Lita that night that she didn't completely end her career and possibly her life, because that was a scary fall. Your body's not supposed to bend that way. Your neck is a very sensitive area on your body, to say the least. And she had already had a neck injury, if I'm not mistaken, before that. So it's just extremely scary. But we were very close to that being one of the worst nights in wrestling history. And not everybody's going to be as lucky as Lita, man. Not everybody's going to be able to walk away from those things. So they do scare the hell out of me. Like Drew McIntyre did one later on in the night. And it's just, I don't know. I've always kind of been, I guess, opposed to those things. Now, there are people who do them just seemingly perfect. There are people who just, for whatever reason, they know how to execute it. Ricochet, he's someone who's on a whole nother level. There's a lot of other guys that could do it too. Drew McIntyre's pretty damn good, like for how big he is. Undertaker used to be able to do this. So, I mean, it just shows that it's a very popular move, but just be careful is all I'm going to say. It's definitely one of the more dangerous things that I've seen. Liv Morgan also had a moment where she had some knees to the face off the turnbuckle. She jumped off the turnbuckle, did a knees to the face. Liv Morgan, or Rhea Ripley, sold it extremely well. That was a pretty good moment in the match. But at the end, Liv Morgan taps out to an inverted cloverleaf and makes a poor fan in the crowd cry. They show that for a little bit. You see a fan just bawling at the idea of Rhea Ripley beating Liv Morgan, and just the fact that they had to witness it in person. They're probably looking forward to that match more than any other. Excuse me. And sure enough, their favorite loses, and that's definitely, I could relate to that. It's happened to me several times, and you definitely don't want to see that happen. But let's go ahead and move on to the first backstage segment here on SmackDown, and this one is inside of the Bloodline's locker room. Roman Reigns asked Jimmy Uso where Jay is, and keep in mind, this is after the Cody Rhodes segment, where after they shook hands and said, "May the best man win," Roman Reigns walked away with that little bit of a kind of a shook look on his face, where he looked a little bit more affected than he might want to, let us know about. And just something that I wrote down in my notes here, but that might lead to this segment here as to why Roman Reigns is so uneasy, why he's so pissed off. And he asked Jimmy where Jay is, and Jay says that, he's a hothead, he just needs some time. Roman says that he's running out of patience, but not with Jay, with Jimmy. So Jimmy obviously says, I'll go talk to him, he's going to go call him, whatever. We do touch back on this a little bit later in the show, however. Keeping things backstage, Santos Escobar calls out Dominic Mysterio. He says that Ray should have punched him last week whenever he was being extremely disrespectful, but don't worry, he will do it for him. And Adam Pearce actually agrees that he deserves a match, so Santos is going to go out to the ring. And if he is as big of a man as he says he is, then he will meet him out there. And that is but he wants it, man to man. He doesn't want Rhea Ripley to go out there. However, she does obviously follow Dominic out there. We get that match next. This is something that I've really enjoyed, I will say. Just Santos being involved in this storyline. I do feel like he adds something. The credibility is there because he wasn't groomed as Rey Mysterio's son to come to this business. He has his own path with his own legado, if I will say, his own legacy that he's trying to fulfill. And, having said all that, he knows, and it's probably genuine, the admiration that he has for Rey Mysterio, and it's the fact that he's looked up to him for his entire life and just wanted to be like him and maybe even surpass some of the success that Rey has had. And just really quickly, I will say, if I can just put a little bit of a pin in that, I did listen, like I said, to the Good Morning WWE episode where they talked about the 2K23 ratings. Rey Mysterio being in the 70s is absolutely absurd. It's preposterous. It's BS. That's one of the most disrespectful ones I've seen. This isn't like Rey Mysterio was some old version of himself. The dude can still go. Isn't that what the game's about? Your talent right now, how good you are? He's better than a lot of people that you guys have rated ahead of him. When I say you guys, I'm talking about the 2K creators. So come on. Rey Mysterio is a hell of a lot better than a 78 or whatever the hell they gave him. Like, what the hell are we doing here? Rey Mysterio can still put on a 5-star match. Let's not kid ourselves. There's a reason why he's still doing it right now. He could be retired, walking into the sunset, already enjoying being inducted into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, or the WWE Hall of Fame, I guess is the actual name for it. But still, he's here because he's damn good, and the fact that they gave him a rating as if he's some washed old man who's a shell of himself, give me a break. Rey Mysterio can still hang with the best of them. But back to what I was saying, I really enjoy Santos Escobar being involved in this because that he is just idolized Rey Mysterio for his entire life. So the fact that he's, following in his footsteps and is pretty damn good in the ring, I will say. Him being involved in this, I feel like it makes it mean a little bit more. So we do get this one-on-one match, Santos versus Dominic. And this is a grudge match here. It's about respecting his father's legacy. You love to see it. You felt invested in this. You actually cared about how it played out and who won. Rhea obviously gets involved in the match. She gets a riptide outside of the ring. And then Dominic uses brass knuckles to steal the win, and then steals and destroys Rey Mysterio's mask that he gifted to Santos. Santos brought it out to the ring with him. He had it on some type of display thing where you were able to see the mask really well and be able to, see exactly what it is. Dominic destroys it, and it seems like they're going to walk away just right after that. And then, booyaka. We get Rey Mysterio's music. He comes out. We think something might happen, man. Because even the commentary team, Rey Mysterio has seen enough. He's finally going to do something. I believed it. I was in the moment. I was hooked here. And he comes out, and he basically just starts begging Dominic again to give him the mask back. Like, come on, Dom, give me the mask. Give me the mask. Dominic drops it on the floor, and as Rey Mysterio reaches down to pick it up, Dominic hits him with a cheap shot and then walks away with Rhea Ripley, setting up for arguably one of the best family versus family matches that I've seen since WrestleMania 20, Kane versus Undertaker. And we're talking about some big-time, long-time storytelling that is brilliantly done. I've been on board with this. I'm not a huge Dominic Mysterio fan in the ring, on the mic, or whatever. It's not my cup of tea. I feel like, I'm taking emotion and all that stuff out of this whenever I'm evaluating Dom, because I understand he's Rey Mysterio's son. I was a fifth grade kid as well whenever he had his segment for the Custody of Dominic ladder match. Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. So, I know who Dominic is. I have a friend, Rojo is what we call him here, in my friend group. He literally looks like Dominic. So I totally understand, why Dominic is popular amongst some fans who say he's good in the ring. He just doesn't really have much to his character. I disagree. I don't think he's that great in the ring. I think people give him a little bit of a curve, and maybe, and I use this term, I guess, loosely a little bit here, but they almost overrate him a little bit. They make him better than what he is because he's Rey Mysterio's son. Just think if he was some random dude, if he was just some random wrestler. Like, just think of some of the dudes who have been cut by WWE over the past year, 2 years. How many of them are better than Dominic in the ring? You could probably count on two hands, to be completely honest with you. And that's being a little bit generous if I'm speaking completely honest. But either way, Dominic does steal this win, disrespects Rey Mysterio again. This is leading to a beautiful WrestleMania match, and cannot wait for this. It could end up being one of Rey Mysterio's last. Like, why not? Why not have your last match be against your son? If you finally get a chance to do it at WrestleMania, like, who else is going to be a better retirement match? I really don't know. Maybe if you could somehow build a Ricochet program that's believable and gets everybody into it because of just their similar styles and how they're both like superheroes in their eras, their respective eras. So I could totally see why Ricochet could be an opponent that is believable for Rey Mysterio. But the fact that this storyline means so much to him, it's not just a typical, you tried to poke my eye out with the corner of the steps type storyline for Rey Mysterio, or one that involves his daughter or something like that. Like, no, this is very very close to home, very meaningful, very personal for him. And these are always the storylines that were the best for Rey Mysterio. Like, whether it is, obviously some of the Eddie Guerrero stuff that we've seen him have some big stuff with Chavo Guerrero, obviously JBL. There's been a lot of wrestlers over the years that Rey Mysterio has had some pretty gruesome rivalries with. I remember the Big Show beat the hell out of Rey Mysterio when he was on a stretcher once. I know some of you know what I'm talking about, and man, that was brutal, where he smacked him on the ring post and just dropped him from like 6 feet up, and Rey was just tied up, couldn't brace for the fall at all, couldn't cover his face or shield any part of his body, and he just smacks the ground on the outside of the ring. And this wasn't 2023 outside of the ring where we got people hitting shooting star presses off the top of the ropes to the outside of the ring. No, this was back in the day where if you did something like that on the outside, you were feeling it, and it was very dangerous. So Rey Mysterio, the finish line is right there for you. And just, get through this storyline and we'll see what's next. But I will say, once he does hang it up, it's going to be a sad day in my household. Just because he is, obviously living legend. But let's go ahead and move on to someone else who I am very fond of. And that is Drew McIntyre. He comes out and he straight up says, we are 4 weeks away from WrestleMania and Drew McIntyre doesn't have a match yet. But he wants to fix that. So right away, immediately, calls out Gunther. Like, you're talking about swinging for the fences. You call out Gunther? But right then, in real time, I was picturing those two at WrestleMania. Just the aesthetic of it, the look of it, the build-up that we could get. And I was in. I was like, okay, Gunther versus Drew McIntyre. Let's do this. Sheamus' music hits. And those two have a pretty hilarious exchange, I will say. Like, Sheamus is just brokenhearted that, you know, he and Drew are so close. And Drew knows how much that Intercontinental Championship means to him at this specific time and how he wants to win it right now. And Drew basically was like, look, I'm sorry. And then as Sheamus, you know, wasn't accepting his apology, Drew finally says, all right, well, look, mate, you're not my parents. I don't have to ask you for anything, all right? Do I need to ask you to go wipe my you-know-what next? See, that's when it kind of started to get funny, where you could tell that the bromance banter was starting to kind of go back and forth. And I enjoyed it, I will say. I was thoroughly laughing here. Just the back and forth between these two guys, man. It was really underrated here. If you didn't get a chance to see this segment in this particular part, I definitely recommend going back to watch it. But Drew does get down to the point and says, hey, look, man, if we're being honest here and you want me to, you know, get to the hard-cut truth, you had two chances, man. You lost both. Move on. It's my shot to win this Intercontinental Championship. Then LA Knight's music hits, but it's funny. Drew and Sheamus don't even pay attention. They're literally just arguing back and forth, not even looking. And LA Knight just is kind of just talking a little bit, saying, you guys don't have to look at me, but you damn well better listen, because we can't go to LA WrestleMania without a moment for LA Knight. And then New Day comes out, their music hits. They basically just insult LA Knight a little bit, and then out comes Karrion Kross. We get a little bit of a mini brawl. This is where I was talking about Drew McIntyre hitting the suicide dive outside of the ring. And Karrion Kross is the one left standing here in the end. So we'll see what happens in this fallout. But let me just say, wouldn't this just be a perfect opportunity for an Elimination Chamber? You know, like if we didn't have a built-in Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, like, well, there's so many credible opponents for this Intercontinental Championship right now. There's no one guy. Somebody like Gunther is so believable inside of that chamber, where it could only make him stronger if he were to actually outlast everyone and win this thing in a gruesome way and utilize that hellacious structure that is the Elimination Chamber. They force it to us now in the timely calendar manner. That is, what, every February, I guess, now that we just had it. I don't know, like, I just feel like with Hell in a Cell, with Elimination Chamber, and many other pay-per-views, they water down the meaning of that actual match. And an Elimination Chamber at WrestleMania, I mean, it's a 2-night pay-per-view. Whatever night that the Chamber is on, the fans would have loved it. I promise you. Like, having a Chamber in the middle of a WrestleMania, like, are you kidding me? That would have been absolutely phenomenal booking. But now they do find themselves in a little bit of a pickle here, a little bit of a situation that they have to get themselves out of by finding a valuable and a worthy opponent for Gunther. And Gunther's one of my favorite wrestlers, man, I will say. So I'm intrigued and looking forward to seeing who they do eventually pick and who eventually earns, because they might have another tournament. That's one thing I will say. I don't want every single championship and every single number one contender to be determined by a tournament. And it feels like they've done that a lot here lately, but nonetheless, I'd rather that be the case than just somebody being awarded one for no particular reason. It does make the path to the Intercontinental Champion a little bit harder. You know, it's like he's Shao Kahn in one of those old school Mortal Kombat games on the PS1, where, you know, you'd have to go through that bracket, you'd have to go through that tower and fight guys like Kano, Scorpion, Raiden, all kinds of different guys, Reptile, Sub-Zero, all the way up to fight Shao Kahn. And if you're lucky enough to beat him, clearly, you know, you were pretty damn good at that game. Well, if you get to the top, and this version of Shao Kahn goes by the name of Gunther, if you can beat him, then you've earned the right to be the Intercontinental Champion. And for the first time in a long time, this belt means something, and I love to see it. Seems like Gunther's been back for a pretty long time now, and he still is only getting more and more credible as the weeks go. But continuing on here, we get a little bit of a video package that shows us there was a brawl backstage earlier in the night that ruined a planned tag team match between Shayna Baszler, Ronda Rousey, up against Natty and Tegan Nox. So Ronda Rousey gets injured during this little scuffle backstage. We get a one-on-one match between Tegan Nox and Shayna Baszler. Tegan starts fast, but she ends up getting the favor returned by Shayna Baszler. And Tegan gets her arm pretty much, tore limb from limb, if that is one way you want to phrase it. But, she does not surpass Shayna Baszler in this one-on-one match, so we'll see what happens. But like I said, last week we got the, you're going to pay for that, Skittles. We'll see you next week. So this was the match we were supposed to get, but Backstage Brawl ruined it. I wonder what really happened here, why we didn't get that match. I guess we'll never know. Maybe it'll get leaked. I don't know. But either way, this one-on-one match was pretty quick and did not do anything. This was actually a restroom break, if I do say so myself. And then we get Gunther talking about how he hopes that they could find a worthy opponent for him, but it doesn't look likely this close to WrestleMania. And he's having his doubts. So we'll see if, in fact, they do end up finding him an opponent. Up next, Bobby Lashley calls out Bray Wyatt. And Uncle Howdy attacks him from behind and then disappears as the lights go out. Now, this looked like possibly, you heard the laugh. I know y'all heard the laugh. Are we sure this is Bo Dallas? Like, are we agreeing here that we think Uncle Howdy is Bo Dallas? Because that's kind of where I am. That's kind of where I'm at here. It just makes so much sense. He's such a wild character. And just, I remember Bo Dallas and kind of just how he looked physically. And I could see it, man. It's what my gut's telling me. And I roll with my gut more often than not. I'm more than fine with being wrong. I will eat my words. But I'm going to just go ahead and hop on the bandwagon. If there's any room, I'm going to go ahead and scooch in here and let you guys know that I do believe Uncle Howdy is Bo Dallas. And I'm sure that will be revealed at some point here down the line. But let's see what else happens here. I know we're getting close to the end. We get that backstage segment where basically Jimmy comes back in as if he just got off the phone. He comes back into the locker room as if he just got off the phone with Jay, and he says that he said, quote unquote, he needs more time. Where Roman Reigns says, are you kidding me? Like, does he really need more time? And that's where Jimmy says, well, he actually told me to leave him the hell alone. And that's where Roman Reigns says that this all started with Sami Zayn, but tonight they get rid of that problem, but he instructs Jimmy to go out to the ring with Solo and make sure that it happens. And as Jimmy leaves, Roman Reigns tells Paul Heyman that Jay has 1 week to show up. So next week on SmackDown is the deadline, essentially. And if he doesn't show up, then Roman Reigns isn't going to blame Sami anymore. He's going to start blaming Jimmy. So now this storyline is starting to turn to Jimmy Uso getting the spotlight week in, week out, whether it's, his altercations with Sami Zayn, his, confrontations backstage and just encounters with Roman Reigns. Starting to get magnified, starting to get a lot more of it. I'm curious to see how this plays out. Clearly, we will get a lot more answers next week. My guess is Jey Uso shows up kind of typically to what he's been doing here lately, where he shows up at the very last minute. He's, pulling his inner shield, showing up through the crowd. He magically appears at the top, and I will say, there's no way in hell, if you're a wrestler standing in the ring, you're going to be able to spot somebody standing up in the top of one of those sections. Like, come on. That's just one of them. Like in Sami Zayn, just seeing him out of the corner of his eye, like, like, are you kidding me? That's something that I should have pointed out last week. But either way, that's something that kind of grinded my gears a little bit. Like, come on, man. So, yeah, we're going to need to see maybe a little bit more of a, I don't know, make yourself more noticeable so we don't have to make unbelievable periphery moments where they see you with their peripheral vision and they could just, somehow magically know that you're standing, I don't know, like 75 feet away. But either way, let's see. This is up next where we get the main event, Solo Sikoa versus Sami Zayn. And, dude, am I the only one that thought Sami Zayn was taking it to his ass? Like, seriously, Sami Zayn was just matching in physicality, the clotheslines, diving over the top rope, taking out Jimmy and Solo at the same time. It wasn't until Jimmy got involved and actually assist here in the match that, basically put Solo in prime position to hit the Samoan Spike on Sami, where he did pick up the win. It wasn't until then where I really had doubts, man. I was thinking, Sami Zayn is really just out here kicking this dude's ass. That's what I like to see. I was a firm believer that even when the bloodline was intact, all 5 members, that Sami Zayn was the best wrestler in the group. And I know people are going to look at me like, are you crazy? Dude, I get it. Roman Reigns is over right now. He is the best superstar in the business. He has the best gimmick right now. He is at the top of the mountain. It doesn't mean that he is a better technical wrestler than Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn got here a different way than Roman Reigns, and that is by being the absolute best at what he does. And he's just in a damn good moment. Now, Roman Reigns is clearly untouchable right now. I don't want people to, twist my words and think I'm saying something I'm not, where I'm just downplaying Roman Reigns. That's not. This isn't an anti-Roman Reigns statement. This is a pro-Sami Zayn statement by saying, hey, this dude can go. He's never had the moment. He's never had the storyline or the opportunity to actually prove that he's worthy of being in the main event of a storyline like this. And I don't know about you. I can't speak for everybody. Everybody's opinion is valued, especially here on the SmackDown review. But I can't tell you if you think that Sami Zayn is worthy of being a main event wrestler. But I can tell you that when the storyline presents it, when the opportunity is there, I've seen a lot more unworthy guys get opportunities at this championship. So if you're asking me, yes, Sami Zayn does deserve to get the main event. But like I said, man, sometimes a storyline like the Cody Rhodes one kind of writes itself, kind of comes out of nowhere, and you're really kind of backed into a corner here. But nonetheless, I like what I'm seeing on a weekly basis, especially, from this whole Sammy, Roman, Jimmy, now Jay, all this stuff. It's going in a good direction, and next week I think we're going to take a pretty big step forward, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. Another thing I'm looking forward to is joining Mr. and Mrs. Casual Wrestling Fan on their show, so one more time, definitely tune into that. Can't wait to talk wrestling with them. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've chatted with Casual Wrestling Fans. It's definitely going to be fun. Also, tune into the Football Function podcast. We literally are dropping an episode every single day. Not on weekends, obviously, and sometimes weekends. It really just depends, I guess, on what's going on that weekend. But Monday through Friday, we are officially a daily podcast, especially, or at least during the off season. But believe it or not, even though our distribution and our episode count is going up during the off season, my workload is somehow going down, if that makes sense. So it's kind of complicated, but we got the regular Football Function, obviously covering everything NFL, everything you need to know about the off season and your favorite team and what's going on with free agency and the NFL draft. So definitely tune into that. We also have a show, College Football Function, pretty much the exact same thing from the college point of view. And then obviously the XFL with our boy Double J. He is a WWE podcast representative. He's one of us, guys. He's part of the community, and he came over to the Football Function family, and he's doing his best, man. He's dropping these XFL podcasts. He's starting to get his feet wet, get more comfortable. You guys go show him some love. I know it'll mean a lot to him if you guys go listen to what he's doing. He's trying to break into this podcasting world, and we're more than happy to have him. We definitely appreciate him putting in the work and making the Football Function take another step forward. But I do want to thank all of you guys for tuning in here to the SmackDown review. Hopefully you will continue to do that on a weekly basis. As you know, these episodes are going to continue to drop. But if you're a first-time listener, definitely come back. We're not going anywhere, and we're going to continue to be buckled up here on this ride and on the road to WrestleMania. Definitely, if you know John, if you're a regular listener, go and give him some kind words. Let him know that, he was missed here on the show. I definitely know that he makes the show a hell of a lot better. There's been times here, especially during football season, where, I haven't been able to watch SmackDown or focus in on wrestling as much as I would have liked. Like during 2022, towards the end of it, I wasn't able to listen to much WWE podcast content. Like, that's just being completely honest. My schedule was just so hectic. And there was a lot of times where, being completely honest, John carried this podcast. Like the SmackDown review, where we'd go through our notes together. He took just deliberate notes. He puts a lot of work into this. He doesn't just show up and talk about wrestling, although that is what we do here. But it's not just that to him. He actually does bring a lot to the table. So definitely wanted to give him a shout out and some kind words. Shout out to everybody else here, Memphis Mark, Anthony DeMarco, the Casual Wrestling family, Matt, of course, DJ Kuzmo for everything he does. Go listen to the Football Function if you haven't already. Subscribe on Patreon, or just subscribe on your favorite podcast app. I almost said podcast app, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's late here, guys. Staying up late to get you guys this episode early in the morning. So, you could return the favor by obviously listening to the show, which obviously you're doing right now if you're hearing this, but go show some love. Subscribe on your favorite podcasting app, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever. Get those episodes automatically dropped. We will definitely appreciate it if you would do that. But with all that being said, guys, have a damn good weekend. Walk passionately in the direction of your dreams, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.